This is a real dichotomy, but it's a train wreck unfolding right before us as we watch it.
Well, I mean, you're seeing it unfold. We saw benefits taken away from Social Security beginning this year with file and suspend and file and restrict, which ended April 30th this year. Now you're seeing next year, based on your income, you're going to see your premiums for Medicare go up 22%, your deductibles go up 23%. And for all individuals in 2018, Medicare Part B premiums are going up, along with Part D, which is the drug prescription benefit. So all of this is going up. And basically what is happening here, the government doesn't have the money, especially Obamacare is accelerating the process because a lot of people are being brought into the system that didn't have medical insurance, and that's putting a strain on the system. Whenever you hear the government say something is free, take out your wallet because nothing's free. Somebody's paying for it somewhere. And a lot more Americans are going to be paying for it. So what you're seeing is the government's going to shift the cost. They're going to shift the majority of that cost to upper income individuals, and they keep redefining upper income as anybody making over $85,000. You are going to receive less coverage, meaning Medicare is not going to start covering. They're starting to restrict the procedures. They're starting to restrict the drugs. They're starting to restrict the treatments. And basically, you're going to see healthcare rationing, much as you see in Canada and throughout socialized medicine in Europe. So this is coming, John, because nothing is free. Somebody somewhere has to pay for the hospitals, the doctors, the medicines, the treatments, and all of that care. And this is going to become a larger and larger expense if you are heading into retirement. So buckle up and prepare for it because it's going to hit you. It's going to hit you this year. It's going to hit you next year and the years after, following every single year. So, John, the double-digit increases for 2017, the 22% increase in premiums and the 23% in deductibles, that's just the start. It goes up for everybody in 2018. They start taxing private medical insurance offered by the employer in 2020. So I'm really surprised that we're not seeing more coverage in this year's presidential debate because this is serious.
Ultimately, when this all plays out, if we don't wind up in totally socialized medicine, because you know that government critters will come back in and they will say, look at the mess this thing is. Now they'll forget to point out that they created the mess, but they'll say, you need us to bail you out of this mess. And lo and behold, remember that when Obamacare went through, the ultimate goal was a single-payer healthcare system. Let's face it. If we go back to Hillary Care, how ironic. Remember, that was a single-payer system, and of course, it bought the dust early on in the 90s because of the protests. But what's happening very slowly is that the burden of providing for medical care will shift away from government and back to the individual again, whether through premiums or some other methods of payment. Ironically, Jim, what began to blow medical costs out of the water was insurance, because as the availability of money came in, remember when the first insurance policy showed up, when was it, back in the 60s or something like that? And as they began to increase the availabilities of money, doctors and hospitals and everybody began to raise their prices. So ironically, that would almost force a free market back in there. How are they going to provide socialized medicine when our government itself is broke at $20 trillion in debt when President Obama leaves office? They can't service that debt forever, can they?
No. And basically what we're going to do is there's two things I think that you're going to see happen. More and more of the burden of healthcare is going to be shifted to the individual. That's number one. Number two, less of the treatments and the options for treating illnesses are going to be covered by government. So basically, John, we're going to be going to healthcare rationing where you wait in line and certain treatments the government's simply not going to pay for. So you're going to have a two-tiered system. Those that are wealthy, just like I have a Canadian friend whose father had heart disease, and to get treated rather than wait in line, he basically had to go to the Cleveland Heart Clinic and pay for it out of pocket himself to get treated rather than waiting in line in Canada. So you're going to see more and more of that, which also means, you know, it's going to be incumbent upon the individual to take better care of themselves with diet, exercise, de-stressing. and leading a healthier lifestyle, because healthcare is just going to get, number one, it's going to be rationed. Number two, it's going to get more expensive. Number three, you're going to have fewer choices. Number four, it's going to be going up at high single digits, if not double digits, as it's going up in 2017.
You know, we've done a lot of shows here, Jim, over the past couple of years about people heading into retirement. And one of the things they don't seem to be planning for is for their medical costs and the increasing level that's going to come out of their own pockets. People are still relying on the system, keeping going the way it is now. And you and I both know that just isn't going to happen.
Well, it doesn't. I mean, if you take a look at next to taxes, the single largest expense that you will face if you are now retired or you're thinking of heading into retirement soon is your medical cost. It's not just the Part B medical premiums that you pay. It's going to be Part D for drug prescription, and it's also going to be your Medigap insurance. And your Medigap insurance is going to be going up at high single, if not double-digit rates, because as Medicare covers less and less of the cost of medicine, whether it's drugs, operations, treating a disease, well, that means your insurance company is going to have to pick up the difference of that cost. What do you think they're going to do? They're going to raise their premiums. There was a study done by the Empower Institute on retirement. It was released. It's called An Apple a Day, the Impact of Health Conditions on Required Savings for Healthcare During Retirement. And what they did is they took a look at a vast majority of sample of people, and they took a look at the various diseases out there. There's 6 of them we'll talk about in just a second. And they took a look at, for example, diabetes, cancer, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, cardiovascular disease, and those that smoke. And they found, John, that as a male, age 65, you can expect to pay $144,000 out of pocket for yourself in retirement. If you're female, you will pay $156,000 for health care expenses during your retirement. So a husband and wife, between them, will spend between $250,000 and $300,000 out of pocket. Now, that includes Medicare Part B premiums, Part D premiums, Medigap insurance, deductibles, and any illnesses. And by the way, that $250,000 and $300,000 does not include long-term care. God forbid if one of you ends up in a facility requiring 24-hour nursing care.
How come women are more expensive than men? You would think it would be cheaper, I would think. Am I not reasoning this right? Tell me.
No, it's because women live longer. So the longer that you live, that's more Medicare premiums, that's more deductible premiums, that's more Medigap insurance. And the fact that you live longer, you're going to be paying more out-of-pocket expenses. So the key thing here is if you're in retirement, you better add $10,000 to $12,000 a year in your budget. Now, in the early years, let's assume that you're healthy. The problem you're going to have is most people think, oh, they're retired, they're in pretty good shape. But that's before they get into their 70s, when we start having, or latter 60s, depending on your health conditions, when these costs start occurring. And now you're going to see an acceleration of government costs coming from Medicare, because Medicare is going to be going broke. And so starting next year, based on your income, you're going to see your premiums go up 22%, your deductibles go up 23%. They're going up again in 2018. And so, John, at a minimum, anybody that's retiring, take your budget and add another $1,000 a month that you need to be saving and putting aside to take care of those expenses later on.
You know, you have to reckon too, Jim, that these are all average costs, and you realize you're depressing me. First of all, you understand that. So I'm going to have to pay for clinical treatment here, and that's going to increase my healthcare costs just because I'm depressed about this whole thing. These are all average costs, and if you get major diseases, especially ones that are chronic and require long-term forms of therapy, etc., the costs are going to be significantly more. And, you know, you and I have talked a lot about on this program about how few Americans are prepared for retirement at all, much less health care. So at a time when the government is running out of its ability to provide all of these things, the people are looking to government to provide it.
And that's a problem. And you can't, John, because as we're seeing right now, we've already begun the great reneging. And we're seeing that now with the cost of premiums. They're cutting back on Social Security benefits. There are a number of things the government is reneging on because it's just like the trustees report that was issued this week. And John, this was in the back pages. I was surprised nobody even covered this issue. And especially in a political campaign. But as you know, Social Security and Medicare has always been called the third rail in politics. Hillary Clinton is basically saying we're going to make those benefits even more beneficial to you. We're going to give out more Medicare benefits. We're going to include more people. We're going to enrich your benefits, where Donald Trump says, no, I'm not going to touch entitlements. So either candidate, one's promising more and one's promising that I'm not going to deal with it. So it's amazing what happens in a presidential election year. What do politicians do? They kiss babies and hand out lollipops. And that's what they're doing this year. They're handing out a lot of lollipops, promising free college, free medical. And this at a week when the Social Security trustees basically said the programs are heading for bankruptcy, and the disability fund narrowly avoided a bankruptcy this year as a result of finagling. They were taking money out of other trust funds and moving it over into the disability fund, which was broke.
Let's take this in a slightly different slant. This all comes down to certain significance for people who are retired, not people who are prepping for it. It affects them. There's no doubt about it. They're going to have to plan for it. But what about people who are already retired as they watch this thing unravel? They had made plans based on certain givens. Those givens probably won't be there.
Well, I mean, you're going to have to start budgeting. I mean, anybody planning for retirement now, let's say you're not retired, we'll take two categories. Number one, plan on spending $250,000 over your retirement lifespan. So that's an extra $10,000 you need to include in your budget. And more realistically, it should be $12,000 because these costs are going to start to escalate. And John, by the way, that doesn't include long-term care. I had a client who basically lived in a family where mom went into a retirement home, and that was costing almost close to $7,000 a month. And what they did is they had a house, and they bought a house, and they set it up for themselves should one of them become incapacitated. So there was an extra bedroom so that the spouse that was unwell could sleep in that bedroom. And they also had a third bedroom that they could have a full-time caretaker, because that would be much cheaper than going into a long-term care facility. The bathrooms were set up for a handicap, their bathtub and everything else. So they're basically saying, look, we don't have enough money in our budget to handle if one of us should go into a long-term care facility. But given hereditary and given what we've seen with our parents who ended up in a long-term care facility, we want to prepare for this down the line. And we know we can't afford to go to a long-term care facility. So they set their home and set it up. Should one of them end up needing that long-term 24-hour care, there would be a separate bedroom. And also they would have in-house care, which would be cheaper than going to a facility.
So to come back to a theme which you have been thrumming here for as long as you've been thrummulating on the program, you should have a plan. 70% of Americans have no retirement plan, and 80% have no medical plans for retirement. You understand the train wreck. The picture we're painting here, as I said before, at the time when everybody else is going to be more dependent on government, government is basically saying it's under the table right now, but we're not going to be there for you. So that's sobering.
Yeah. And basically, there's a couple things that I would do. If you're 65, you're getting ready to retire, I would have the most complete physical that you can possibly get. And maybe before you retire, and when you have private insurance, and, you know, just tell your doctor, hey, look, I want the works. I'm getting ready to retire. Really tell me what kind of medical shape am I in? So you have some kind of knowledge of how good of a health. We did an interview last year. There's a new kind of blood test that they can do, John, that's more comprehensive on assessing heart and cardiovascular disease, not picked up in a regular blood test. So there are a number of things you can do, from, prostate test for prostate cancer and heart disease, as we interviewed Caldwell Esselstyn from the Cleveland Clinic last week on the program. So get a comprehensive physical, take a look at family history. What was mom and dad's health? How long did they live? Did they have long-term care issues? Did one of them have Alzheimer's? Those kind of things. And then incorporate it into your budget. Because a lot of times people retire in the early years of retirement. That's the time you want to get the travel out of the way when you're in good health. But a lot of times a lot of money is spent and nothing is set aside for those latter years when these health care costs start to pile up. And unfortunately, John, it's going to start hitting people sooner than they expect, especially